Good morning, everybody. Thank you to Sharon and Claire for inviting me to give this presentation. It's a sort of follow-on update from presentations that I've done previously for Northwest Aerospace Alliance, and it's some of my insight into the current state of the aerospace and defence sectors. Before I start that, I'll just try and introduce myself a little bit. My name's David Bailey. I am a director for my own company, Aerospace Consulting. Some of you may know me from the work that I did previously for Northwest Aerospace Alliance when I was chief executive up until February 2020, I think. I continue to work for Sharon and the team with the Northwest Aerospace Alliance. I also have the position of Chief Executive for Composites UK, the National Trade Association for the composites sector, across a range of sectors: automotive, aerospace, construction, marine, and others. I've done work for Lancashire Enterprise Partnership across the last year. I led the Lancashire Aerospace Task Force. I support, I'm an accredited lead assessor for the NMCL programme, National Manufacturing Competitiveness Levels for the automotive sector, and for the SC21 Competitiveness and Growth programme for the aerospace sector. I continue to represent all of the regional aerospace alliances on the board of the Aerospace Growth Partnership, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail later. And I also sit on the equivalent for the composite sector, the Composite Leadership Forum, which is again a cross-sector board with representatives from the automotive sector, including people like McLaren and Ford, but also from the construction sector with organisations like Atkins. So that's the type of stuff that I've been doing. My only plug in this presentation, as we emerge from the pandemic, I'm now starting to think about how I could support maybe one or two companies on a regular basis, maybe a day or two per month. I think I can provide unique insight into strategy and stimulate strategic thinking. I think I can provide advice on marketing and business development and in support for improving your business. So if that's of interest to anybody, please get in touch. My contact details are on the slide, my email address, my LinkedIn profile. So if anybody's interested in that, please drop me a line. I'm also going to plug, because I'm involved in it as well, the 7th Northwest Aerospace Alliance annual conference. I'm really looking forward to this because it's a face-to-face event, and I think we're all looking forward to getting back to seeing each other face-to-face and networking again. It's themed around next generation supply chains in the UK's aerospace and defence sectors. And as Sharon said earlier, there's some really good organisations involved. I'm only going to drop a few names, but we've got Michael Christie, Project Director for Future Combat Air Systems, lined up, and Scott McClarty, Senior Vice President, Airbus Programs for Spirit Aerosystems. So there's not much that those two people don't know about what's going on within the aerospace and defence sectors. So I really encourage everybody to get involved in that annual conference and contact Sharon and Claire to book those places. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the main content of the presentation, which I've really split up into 4 areas. So first of all, a view of global markets, then a bit about aerospace industry news, the things that I've found interesting. Sustainability is becoming really a key element of the agenda for the aerospace and aviation sectors. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about UK aerospace strategy and how the Aerospace Growth Partnership is trying to form some of that at the moment. Okay, so from a global markets perspective, you know, we've seen the impact of the pandemic on the global economy through 2020, and a drop of more than 3% in GDP. That's a significant number in terms of what that means in dollars. It's trillions of dollars. So we've seen that GDP fall through 2020. However, UK fall has been far more significant than the global fall. So we've seen almost 10% fall in GDP through 2020. It's £216 billion was knocked off the economy. And to a certain extent, that's because of the severity of the pandemic in the UK, also because of the tight restrictions around lockdowns, and you can see that as we look more in more detail around how that GDP fell across 2020 and 2021. So, you know, that first lockdown was really significant, hammered the economy to a certain extent, required in terms of coping with the pandemic and the crisis. But you can see how UK has been impacted much more significantly than other parts of the world. And you can also see how different sectors in the UK were impacted through the pandemic. So some sectors, like construction, retail, actually returned back to pre-pandemic levels of business much quicker than other parts of the economy, and the arts and the entertainment sector and accommodation and food services in particular were very badly hit, as was of course the air travel sector. I would encourage any of you looking at market forecasts of looking at your predictions for your business going forward to be looking at the information that IATA is producing on behalf of the global airlines. The sort of the view of passenger travel is probably the best predictor of what the airlines are going to do in terms of buying new aircraft. And what we can see in this chart here is that whilst domestic travel is starting to grow back, international travel is still in a very weak position. So domestic travel now recovering to probably something like 80% of what it was pre-pandemic, but international travel, and I think in this context we're thinking about domestic travel as really being European. International would be flying to the Americas or into Asia. That's the international travel very weak at probably only 15% of pre-pandemic numbers. And we would normally have expected a global shock to the economy to have dissipated by now. So we've seen that in many of the previous global shocks to the industry, but with this one, the pandemic, it is taking much longer for the industry to recover. So normally we'd expect recovery within 18 months. with this pandemic, it looks like it's going to be much more significant length of time. But demand is there. So, you know, as soon as the UK announced Portugal was added to the green list, people started booking flights. And I think that's really important, that there is that pent-up demand for travel. People do want to go on holiday. People do want to go and see other parts of the world. Unfortunately, as soon as it was removed from the green list, that demand dissipated quite quickly, very quickly. So the message here, I think, is that governments, particularly across Europe, have got to get confidence in that green list approach, and demand will be there. And it needs to be, because the importance of summer holidays in Europe to the aviation industry. You can see here across 2019 the level of passenger revenues, and Q3, the European summer, was 34% of all passenger revenues for 2019. You can see there in blue what levels of revenues were achieved in 2020, and then where we are in 2021. And what we need to see is some significant growth in that red bar from Q2 to Q3. And then the best view that I've seen so far in terms of how the aviation industry is likely to recover, and you know, this is a chart that's been used regularly since the start of the pandemic, in terms of, will it be a V-shaped recovery, will it be a U-shaped recovery? This is the best view that we've got at the moment, but essentially what this is saying is that we are unlikely to recover back to where the original growth forecast was pre-pandemic. So that's the dashed line. So essentially the industry will have lost about 2 years worth of growth, and that's not expected to come back across the time period like the next 10 years. Although we will go back to higher levels of business than where we were previously. It's just that we won't be back to where that original pre-COVID forecast was. So again, a good chart, I think, for businesses to be thinking about planning what their prospective revenues going forwards might look like. Okay, we're going to stop there, and we're going to try and do something really clever, and do some, well, Claire's going to try and do something really clever, and we're going to do some poll questions. This is anonymous. We're only going to see aggregated results of the data. So question 1 is, how do you think your business will grow or fall in 2022? So you can only input into one of these. So do you think
I think it won't work if anybody's on their phone. It has to be on a desktop,
okay,
just in case.
Thank you. So a range of possible responses. We're looking at the 2022 number, and then again in 2023. I'm even going to have a go myself. Okay, can you see results coming in, Claire?
Yeah, most people have nearly voted, 21 out of 26, 80% have voted last year.
And okay.
If we can share the results.
Okay, so in 2022, greater than 10%, and for 2023, I've got to scroll down myself, 0 to 5%. That's interesting. So I'm assuming that sort of reflects growing back after probably taking a bit of a hit in 2020/2021, and then maybe returning to a little bit more like normal levels of growth in 2023. Although still 30% of organizations in 2023 predicting more than 10% growth. That's really positive. Good to see. Okay, thank you, Claire. We're going to do a little bit more polling later, but I'll go forwards now with a view of the aerospace industry news. So these are just some of the things that I thought have been particularly interesting recently. Some really interesting stuff coming out around the F-35 program. Politically in America seem to be concerns about the ability to lower operating costs and the sustainment costs of that program. So across its 66-year life cycle, which is just phenomenal, isn't it? I know Paul Burns has talked to NWAA members before about this huge life cycle. So 66-year program, total budget of $1.7 trillion. But it's interesting that the sustainment costs of that are projected to now reach $1.27 trillion. So the sustainment costs is everything associated with operating that aircraft through its life cycle. And whilst they've managed to get now the unit costs for F-35 to below $80 million per unit. I can remember when it was at $110 million per unit. The jet still remains with a cost per flying hour of $33,000, which some people involved in the program, particularly from a customer perspective, is saying is something that they will struggle to live with. And as a result of that, there are indications that the pace at which the F-35 is to be acquired may slow down. It's interesting that the US Air Force have asked for less aircraft in the 2022 budget than they did in the 2021 budget. And the UK has also said that the high costs of supporting F-35s and a failure to integrate the MBDA Meteor missile could slow British plans to buy more of the F-35. And the US Air Force is also rumoured to be looking at alternative aircraft and potentially a new clean sheet 4.5 generation fighter aircraft. And they're also now starting to talk up the next generation air dominance aircraft. So some concerns potentially around F-35 and its affordability. However, positive, Lockheed says global demand for F-35 remains strong. And I think we've seen this recently through news coming out of Canada, Finland, and on the right-hand side here, Switzerland, in terms of their potential spend on 36 F-35 fighter jets. So to a certain extent, news inside America seems to be a lot of concern about affordability. Outside of America, there seems to be global demand. On to civil aerospace, and I'm sure you've seen some of these numbers in the press. I think from my perspective, Airbus and its supply chain is likely to recover more quickly than Boeing and its suppliers. not because of the market, but because Boeing has got additional challenges. We've all known about the 737 MAX challenges, but even in the last week or so, new challenges on 787. Airbus have reported that they expect to increase rates to 45 aircraft per month by the end of 2021 and return to the pre-pandemic production rate of 64 aircraft a month by the second quarter of 2023. I think more interestingly, they're indicating that they're studying increasing rates up to as many as 75 aircraft per month by 2025. And that sort of begs the question, is that because they see the market in general for single aisle aircraft growing, or because they sense an opportunity to win more market share from Boeing? And that will be relatively new for this sector. I'll show you some numbers later that shows that, you know, Airbus and Boeing have been sort of relatively level pegging in this marketplace, but the indications are here that the difficulties with the 737 MAX and the competitiveness of the A321XLR could mean that Airbus can increase market share, taking it from Boeing. A220 looks good. Airbus have announced plans to take production rate to 14 aircraft per month by 2025. But production rates for A330neo and A350 are still very low at 2 and 5 aircraft a month. And with that international travel that I showed you on that IATA slide, still extremely weak and recovery not forecast until 2025, then the supply chain is going to have to wait for this to return to normal. However, maybe lower rates will become the new normal. It may take a few years to play out before we know what's going to happen here. As the Chief Executive Composites UK, I've got some concerns about this because of the greater exposure that composite suppliers are likely to have, given the amount of composite structures in aircraft programs like A350 and 787. And hopefully aircraft such as the A220 can balance this. From a Boeing perspective, they've still got a significant number of 737 MAXes in inventory. Spirit the same in terms of fuselages. So there's a view that says that clearing this inventory is going to take about 2 years, and that's going to suppress production rates. And as such, Boeing is aiming for a 737 MAX production rate of 31 aircraft per month in 2022. The competitiveness of that A321XLR compared to the MAX 9 and MAX 10 indicates that Boeing are going to lag Airbus production rates. And with Airbus having more time to sell the XLR, it'll become more difficult for Boeing to make a decision about any new middle of the market aircraft. And we've talked about that now for probably 3 or 4 years. But it's not long before Airbus will have that XLR ready to sell into the marketplace. Boeing are in the same position as Airbus with the 777X and 787, maybe in a slightly worse position because they've got additional problems with certification of the 777X, and this week new faults found with the 787. So they're in a difficult position. However, the good news, United Airlines unveiled its largest ever order for Boeing and Airbus jets, buying 270 planes. Boeing dominated the order with 200 Boeing 737 MAXes, whilst United also bought 70 Airbus A321neos. United are saying that they need to boost their domestic capacity, and because they can see resuming of air travel, they need to put in place their domestic capacity. So that's a really good indicator for the market. A good reference point in terms of numbers, I find, is through this wiki page. It's a good set of data. It's always well updated. It's always very current. It's interesting here to compare the Boeing and Airbus deliveries year on year. As I said earlier, previous years, Airbus and Boeing have been very level pegging in their deliveries into the single aisle market in particular. You look at the total number of aircraft deliveries in 2018, Boeing 806, Airbus 800. Then you see in 2019 the impact of the 737 MAX. Boeing aircraft deliveries fall to 380, Airbus's rise to 863. Then we see in 2020 the impact of the pandemic. Boeing numbers fall further to 157 aircraft. Airbus's fell 35% from 863 deliveries to 566. And then what you can see in 2021 is where essentially Airbus and Boeing are for the first half year. So Boeing at 156 aircraft, Airbus at 297 aircraft. And I think what's important there is that in June, Airbus delivered more than 70 airplanes. They've got, that's the strongest month that they've had since the peak of 89 aircraft in December 2020. So certainly, lots of evidence there of Airbus starting to get back to 2019 levels of production. So in summary, civil aerospace sector was already undergoing significant change prior to the pandemic. We'd seen Bombardier withdraw from the commercial aerospace sector. We'd also seen some massive mergers such as Raytheon and United Technologies. I think now, across the last 18 months, we're now starting to see increasing awareness of the impacts of climate change and the potential to use the pandemic as a catalyst for change and transition to a more sustainable industry. So in my view, the reshaping of the aviation and aerospace sector is picking up speed, and there are likely to be challenges and opportunities ahead for the suppliers. Okay, I ended there and really as an introduction into the whole theme around sustainability, because I think this is becoming increasingly important, certainly at a national but also at an international level. The UK has enshrined in law that we will achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So we have to do this. And if we look at the emissions from the aviation sector, we can identify where those emissions are made across the different types of aircraft that we use. And as a result of that, there are likely to be different solutions for how we deal with these emissions. So some of those solutions, and particularly for international travel, wide body jet aircraft, are likely to be around things like sustainable aviation fuels, because it's unlikely that for some time we'll be able to fly across the Atlantic on batteries, but they might be appropriate in other areas of the market. We'll see hydrogen as a fuel being used domestically. And there are a whole range of potential ways of mitigating the emissions. So whole range of technologies and platforms that are currently being developed, and that's something that all suppliers should be thinking about. Which types of aircraft program are we going to be involved in the future? What types of aircraft are going to replace the ones that we're currently working on? And actually, it's a significant opportunity going forward. So whilst the view of the existing generation of aircraft is worth $6 trillion out to 2035, these new technologies will be worth $17 trillion out to 2050. Big transition is expected around about the 2035 timescale. So there is going to be stuff earlier than that. So, you know, we can all see in the news at the moment lots and lots of platforms in development, lots of stuff that's in the one-seater, maybe out to 12-seater. But in the 2035 time frame, we'll be looking at how do we transform single aisle sized aircraft to be more environmentally friendly. And just two examples recently, Vertical Aerospace have achieved significant orders for their new electric aircraft. Heart Aerospace, based in Sweden, have also had aircraft purchased by United Airlines. Now, there are a range of these platforms in development, and I know it's difficult to pick winners, but you know, some of these programs here are going to be really significant in number if their forecasts play out. You know, Vertical are talking about 100 aircraft per month, so that becomes a significant opportunity for supply chain post 2025. And then, you know, I talked about net zero emissions by 2050. We've also got the pledge to cut carbon emissions by 78% by 2035. And I'd encourage you all to look at the government's 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution, which has identified 10 areas where innovation and technology can contribute to the UK achieving its targets. So the government's strategy, it's available on the government website for download, identifies these 10 areas where the government is going to invest in capability, in infrastructure. And again, I would encourage companies to be thinking about what that might mean for them. I did some work with Gordon Smith from Northwest Aerospace Alliance, who I know is on the call today, to look at what would this mean for the Northwest. And if you think about the Northwest of England's concentration of advanced manufacturing and chemical production, its energy usage, then you can see very, very well straight away how this is a place-based approach. You know, the Northwest can contribute to the Jet Zero, the electric aircraft. It can contribute to electric vehicles. It can contribute through green shipping, through wind turbines offshore, through advanced nuclear. There's lots and lots of stuff in here where the Northwest has got significant industry and infrastructure assets. And we should be starting to think about what capabilities we've got in the supply chain and how they can apply to this. So last poll questions. First up is, which of these provides the best new business opportunity for your business? And I think for this one, Claire, people can tick more than one if they want to.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, multiple choice.
The first one is about aerospace. So do you think you've got more opportunities in just more efficient current generation aircraft? So that's going to be better and better gas turbine engines, better aerodynamics. Is it the next generation aircraft, sustainable aviation fuels and hydrogen, electric regional aircraft, new hybrid electric business jets, sub-regional electric aircraft, or urban air mobility, the flying taxis? So that's the question one. This question, sorry, it's question three. Question four is then, from a cross-sector approach, which of those opportunities in the 10-point plan do you think is an opportunity for your business? Offshore wind, hydrogen, advanced nuclear power, zero emissions, land transport, green ships, green construction. So please tick away now. Have we got some answers, Claire?
Yeah. We've got about 8 people are still voting, so about 26 people have voted. So just give it a couple more seconds. Everyone's finished. Yeah. Okay, on the poll. Should be able to see the results now. Can you see it?
I can. And I think that probably reflects my view as well. The new business opportunities are probably still in the current generation of aircraft, whether that's more efficient gas turbine engines or aircraft using new fuels. So I don't think that is surprising at all. Nice to see that 35% of people think that the urban air mobility stuff provides an opportunity. And then the next question, advanced nuclear power, and again, I'm not surprised at that. Often aerospace companies are involved in the nuclear sector as well. Interesting that 50% has said zero emissions land transport. Okay, thank you very much for contributing to the poll. I think we'll think about how we use that information, maybe to set up future speakers, future webinars. Let me just see if I can move my slides forward. Okay, so final section, UK aerospace strategy. So you'll hear me talk about the Aerospace Growth Partnership previously. So this is a strategic partnership between UK government and the industry, and its aim is securing and growing UK's share of the global aerospace market. And it looks for exploiting opportunities for growth. There's a lot of work done around generating R&D funding and driving innovation. Just want to give you a feel for who's involved. I've never presented on this before, but this is the board. It's not all of the board members. There's actually more than this, but these are some of the board members of the Aerospace Growth Partnership. So it's chaired by Colin Smith at CBE. Colin is the ex-president of Rolls-Royce, and it's co-chaired by Paul Scully, who is currently Minister for London and Minister for Small Business within the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Balaji Srimula-Nathan is the AGP Programme Director. And then there are a range of people from ADS, our National Trade Association, civil servants within the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and then largely industry, Catapult Centre, academia representatives. But you can see there, I think, some very senior representatives of the aerospace sector, including the likes of Sir Michael Ryan, recently knighted Vice President and General Manager for Spirit Aerosystems. I represent all of the Regional Aerospace Alliances within this group. And this group is currently looking at refreshing the strategy that the AGP has for the UK's aerospace sector. And I just wanted to show you a little bit of that. We're doing that because the environment is changing. So clearly, from a society perspective, there are growing concerns about the environment, and we know that aerospace is hard to decarbonize, but we've got to do something about that. We know that the investors recognise that recovery is going to be slow, but also recognise that there are going to be disruptive technologies. The government has got more of a cross-sectoral approach to economic policy, and is very much now focused around net zero, around enterprise, and around innovation. They call it ENZI at the moment, Enterprise, Net Zero, Innovation, ENZI. There's also the levelling up agenda, which the Prime Minister will be talking about this morning. There's the Global Britain strategy, and there's the sustainability strategy that I talked to you about earlier. We have a Jet Zero Council now as well, which is sort of bringing aviation and aerospace together, and to a certain extent that is the direction of travel of the government. So the Aerospace Growth Partnership has been refreshing its strategy, and underneath the purpose of helping to build a sustainable aerospace industry that benefits the whole of the UK. And it's really developing now 3 key strategic themes around supporting innovation in more sustainable technologies, creating a world-leading manufacturing value chain, and building skills for the next era of flight. And all of this has been done in order to shape the spending review input. So the comprehensive spending review will be undertaken by the government really between now and October, as the government decides where it can make investments into the economy. Now, the Regional Aerospace Alliance have been working together to understand how their 1,200 members, many of which are SMEs, can contribute to that new AGP strategy, how they can help to build a sustainable aerospace industry that benefits the whole UK. The chief executive of the RAAs and myself pulled together a briefing paper that we submitted into the AGP and was well received. And they're currently now discussing the sort of content of what could go into a comprehensive spending review on behalf of the supply chain and the SMEs. And the questions that are being asked are, what do UK supply chain companies and SMEs in particular need to do to prosper? What can they do for themselves? How can industry bodies such as the Northwest Aerospace Alliance help and support them? How can customers, primes and tier ones best support them? How can government help SMEs achieve their objectives better, and why is that help needed? And then how will doing these things help the UK government achieve its objectives? So if we can answer all of those questions there, then we can develop an ask of government. And we're thinking about those questions in terms of export, innovation, technology, SME capability, skills and finance. And we're also considering how that support might need to change as we progress from recovering from the pandemic through the ramp up of current generation aircraft, and then through a transition phase to ultra low and zero emissions aircraft. So that's a piece of work that's ongoing, and it's something that we'd be interested in your input too. So if you can think about how you might answer those 6 questions, that would be really useful input. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. I think I've gone way over time. Apologies for that. Happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. I can't see if there's any hands or anything like that. Can you see if anyone's got any hands raised, Claire?
No, I can't. Everyone's still on mute, so people are welcome to come off mute if they've got any questions for David.
Hi, David, it's Gordon. Just a thought, maybe you could send those 6 questions out to all the attendees and just see if we get the equivalent of the direct feedback survey. That would be really helpful, I think.
Claire, you've got the email addresses. Can you do that?
Yep, sure. Yep, no problem, will do.
That'd be really good.
Thank you.
Okay, if nobody's got any questions.
Jonathan's got his hand up.
Okay.
Hi, David. I was just going to ask, how far away do you think is the penetration of China Aerospace Corporation into the market? I've read things that suggest they might have a significant penetration in the coming 10 years, but is it? Do you agree with that kind of characterization, or do you think they're a lot further behind than that?
Sorry, are you saying China's penetration into the global civil aerospace market?
Yes.
I
mean, it's not significant at the moment.
No, and to a certain extent, it doesn't need to be. So they've got a big enough domestic marketplace to make, you know, the COMAC aircraft in particular sustainable. I think that, you know, given the relative positions of America and China at the moment, I can't see there being a rush to certify a COMAC aircraft. I think that is still some way off, to be honest with you. But their own market is big enough to be able to make it sustainable.
Thank you.
Just to say, Sharon seems to be having some technical issues with her microphone, so we're moving to sign language. No, I was just going to say, obviously people have got some more questions, we can take them now, or if we have set up an AirMeet networking session. I have put the link in the chat. So do you want do people want to leave it there and move over to the networking, or has anybody got any more questions for David? You do, sorry, can I just say you do have to open it in Chrome, just as a footnote.
So I'm going to move over to the AirMeet, where I think we can then meet on tables.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to discuss any of the presentation, but also this in particular. How do we think the supply chain can contribute to AGP, UK aerospace strategy, and what support would you value from government? So what would help your companies? Quite happy to discuss all of that on the AirMeet in 2 minutes after I've topped up a coffee. But thank you, Sharon and Claire, for the opportunity to present.
Just David, just a quick one. Will we be circulating the slides?
Yes, I'll have to send it to you in PDF.
Yeah, we can sort that out after. Yeah, perfect.
It will also go on my website, my new website, www.aerospaceconsulting.co.uk, and you'll be able to download it from there. Another plug.